Hello there and welcome back to another edition of Silly Car Showdown. Today, we are taking a look at the BMW 2002 Turbo. This car was requested by Chaser Alteza Corona, I believe that's his name. I've just got it written as Chaser on the request list. Anyways, this is a pretty interesting car actually. One of the first sort of performance cars I think to use a turbocharger. Certainly one of the first ones I can think of. The 2002 Turbo has become rather synonymous with BMW fans. It's been famed for its sort of sporty handling. I believe it did pretty good when it was a race car as well. I think it did touring cars and stuff like that back in the day. Personally, not a massive fan of it. I don't really like the styling from the front end anyway. The rear end looks quite cool, but the front end not so much. But it is a dinky little sports car, which is pretty fun to throw around, so it gets marks from me in that regard. Anyways, the starting PI is pretty low on this one, D500, but we do get a choice of 4 engine swaps. We can go with a 3.2 litre inline 6, a 2 litre inline 4 from a Honda, the 4 litre V8 from a E92 BMW M3, and of course the ever-present Turbo Rally. We are going to go for the 4 litre V8 today. This was the engine that was an option in the Z4 as well, and we never used it in that. As usual, in accordance with the rules of this series, no Forza Aero is allowed, so the car has to run pretty much as it is. I'll take the rear bumper off though. I don't know why it wasn't off anyways, actually, technically, but it adds to the paint job, so sod it. We are definitely going to want some racing tyres. 245s on front, 265s on rear. I would prefer bigger tyres, but for a car of this vintage, that does seem about average. Right, that's sort of the 2 main upgrades out of the way, so we just got to put all this little bits and bobs on there. Definitely going to want a gearbox. I don't know what this thing would have been stock. I'm assuming it was a 5-speed. 1973, relatively upmarket sports car, probably a 5-speed. I doubt it was still a 4. Not entirely sure on that though. Race suspension does drop it a fair little while. See what I mean about like the front end? It does, in this stance, it just sort of looks weird with like the headlight popping out. It's a bit rush jobby, if you ask me, but there you go. Weight reduction really is not going to remove a lot of weight, because this thing is actually pretty darn light from standard, although this V8 probably weighs a fair amount. Not a huge fan of the M3's V8, I've got to be perfectly honest, but, you know, it is a unique-ish engine, and it seems like it's a pretty suitable placement for this BMW 2002 Turbo, so sod it. Loud motorbike. Intercooler interestingly drops the PI a fair bit. I'll go oil and cooling. I'm not sure whether to go with that intercooler or not. We'll come back to that. Flywheel, yep, right. Okay, never mind. If it puts me up to 867 horsepower, I ain't gonna argue with it. 867 horsepower, 561 foot-pound torque, 2,287 pounds of weight. Relatively light. 4.2 seconds to 60, top speed 226 miles per hour apparently. Those are pretty good statistics actually overall, especially for a car of this vintage. Usually you'd expect something, you know, with the tiny tyres that this has to be a little bit sort of downplayed on the benchmark, but this actually seems like it might be okay. Of course there's only one real way to find out if it's okay, and that's by taking it to our track, so let's get over there and see what our 2002 Turbo V8 does. So here we are at our Edinburgh course, ready to set 5 laps with our BMW 2002 Twin Turbo V8. Our current leader is the Ferrari FXXK, which set a time of a 1:34.196. The BMW unlikely to beat that. I'm not actually sure on this BMW. We've had a fair few classic sports cars go around. You know, the best of those probably being the Fox Body Mustang, which I highly doubt this is going to go anywhere near. In terms of anything else, there's the Nova, the Datsun 240Z, the 240SX. Cars like that sort of sit in the between like 147s and 151s. I have a sneaking suspicion it's going to end up somewhere around there. It's not the highest PI car in the world, so I don't expect it to be particularly amazing in terms of its lap time, but you never know. One thing I will say is this engine sounds very NASCAR engine-esque, like the old Forza NASCAR engines used to sound like this, so not quite sure what's going on there, but there you go. It is only a 4.5 litre V8. Ironically enough, the same engine, or it's the same engine, the same displacement and number of cylinders as a Ferrari 458, which is a very rare engine swap to see in this game. It appears in a couple of Italian cars, but I think it's one of the only engine swaps in this game so far we haven't actually used. And that's mostly because a car has not turned up that gives me the opportunity to use it yet, so I'll keep an eye out for one in the future though. It's not a massively interesting engine, but it is a unique-ish engine. Although it used to be in everything back in Forza's heyday. Oh, heyday. Sort of 5 and 6, that engine was everywhere, but now it's kind of gone away a little bit more, so the way things are occasionally. This is a pretty nice handling car, I do have to say. It's dealing with the power quite well. 867 horsepower is a fair amount, and it seems to just go to the rear tyres just fine. It will try to break away if you sort of floor it in second gear instantly, but as long as you're careful on the throttle, this thing feels pretty tight. It feels pretty good in terms of its sort of power delivery and all the rest of it. This engine, I believe this engine has a reputation for being a pretty smooth V8 overall. Of course, that's sort of what V8s are made to be. They're supposed to be lovely, torquey, smooth engines. And I believe this one was, especially in its naturally aspirated form, I'm sure the twin turbos, not massively helping that at the moment, but it feels pretty good. Again, going through 265 tyres. Because this is one of the lower powered engines, I say lower powered, 860 horsepower is not a low power engine, but when you compare it to some of the other engine swaps that we've had go around, again, look at last time with the 1500 horsepower Aventus, you know, this is relatively tame, and there's probably some real life cars that have put 800 horsepower through 265 rears, at the very least 265 fronts. Can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm almost certain that has happened. Yeah, it feels pretty alright. Up hill areas, it can struggle a little bit. You can sort of feel that power slipping through the rear axle slightly. Cars sort of trying to claw on for dear life through those sections, but it's to be expected, you know. It's sort of what these sports cars do, especially the rear-wheel drive ones, you know. They're not meant to claw themselves up high inclines at low speeds because they start, ooh, okay, 148.977, and that is very quick indeedo. Where would that put this? You put it between the Nova and the 240Z. Interesting place to be. That'd actually be pretty good. I mean, 148 dead-ish would be good for this as well. They put it somewhere near the RB Mustang, which is actually kind of an interesting comparison between the two. Both relatively old cars. The Mustang had ridiculous tyre whips, but no real power. This is quicker in a straight line, significantly, but through the corners, probably less so. And then, of course, again, Viper Box Mustang currently is sort of our leader when it comes to these older sports coupes. Unless I'm completely forgetting one, but I don't think I am. For the most part, this series runs pretty simply, really. The older the car is, usually the worse off it does. Although there are some cars that buck that trend. Stuff like the Lola and the Metro and stuff like that, but for the most part, the older the car is, usually it does not quite well, and then obviously the four-wheel drive cars have a minor advantage. I don't think it's a crucial advantage, though, around this track, which is sort of a good thing. I did want to make this track too unbalanced for all-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive. You know, I love all-wheel drive, but I didn't want to use driveline swaps of the cars, and I wanted rear drive cars and front drive cars to be competitive, and I think I've sort of ended up in an environment where all three drivetrains can be good in their own little special sectors. Problem is, we just haven't had many front wheel drive cars, and nor have we got many requested, so. But then again, like, the number of front wheel drive cars in Forza is a lot less than the number of rear wheel drive and all wheel drive cars available in this game, so just the way the cookie crumbles. But it is a very smooth car, this one. Through this first section, dare I say, I think I'm actually enjoying driving that more than the Aventus, just because I can chuck it around a little bit more. I feel a little bit more confident in its size. It's the other thing as well, is it's quite diminutive, which is sort of helping. And you can definitely feel the fact this does not weigh nearly as much as that Aventador as the Urus did. And a couple of Lever cars. Probably one of the lighter cars we've had, not like one of the super lightweights. It's not like a Lola or something like that, but it's a pretty darn light car, and it's certainly better than something like the Cadet, which is, I mean, they're both German sports cars. Oh, I say the Cadet's a sports car. They're both sort of coupes from Germany, or family coupes. I don't fucking... saloon-ish things. Two-door saloon-ish things, and this is much better than that is. Then again, the Cadet was on like 185s and had VTEC, so... Right, coming across this area, yeah, it deals with almost every area of the track quite nicely. It is a hell of a lot better than you'd expect. That is probably my like overall sum up of this 2002 Turbo. It is just better than you'd expect. There we go. We'll get stopped-ish into there. It's much better than you'd expect. It's not. It's obviously not going to be a top tier car, but it is pretty darn good. I'm quite enjoying driving this. It's a pretty good all-rounder as well. You know, straight line speed it seems to be doing pretty darn well with. Handling's pretty good. It is better than I expected. It really is much better than I expected. Gonna have a few issues through there. Try not to get caught out by the usual bumps that are on the end of this road for some reason. A little bit sideways. Yeah, if you try and push the power down a bit too much, eventually, you know, whether you like it or not, you're raining 860 horsepower down on some medium-sized rear tyres. You know, eventually they are going to give way, but it does take them a while, which is nice. And the front end is a lot better than you'd expect. It doesn't quite turn in as sharply as some other vehicles that we've seen, but it certainly is not half bad. The real question is, would I take this over the 240Z? I'd probably still take the 240 because the 240 was a little bit nicer to drive, but then again, this is quicker than 240 in every aspect, really. Obviously, it's more powerful, so... And handling-wise, it hasn't got quite the grip that the Mustang or the Datsun had, but of course the difference there is those cars didn't quite have the... I don't know where I was going with that. It only affects them so much, you know. Grip is nice, but I can deal with a little bit of it still happening, and it's not really affecting the pace of the car all that much, so... I don't know if any of that made sense. I'm feeling that I just went on like a random ramble, but I'm sure some of you probably get the point. I've hit quite a few walls on this lap, so this lap is not going to be any quicker, but it doesn't really need to be, not particularly. A 148.977 for the 2002 Turbo. Yeah, solid. Certainly, a quite nice car to drive. It surprised me how much control you actually had with the throttle down in this one. There are a couple of things I'd change. It could really benefit if it had like slightly bigger rear tyres, slightly bigger front tyres. You know, maybe if it was 265 front and 285 rear, this could be a, you know, a very, very, very good car indeed. But as it stands, you know, it's still pretty darn good. I can't really complain about it all that much. Perhaps maybe not interesting enough for certain people, but for me, certainly, I quite liked it. Anyways, a 148.977 will put it in to a 28th place. It goes in between the Allright Nova, which it is 0.3 of a second down on, and the Datsun 240Z, which it is about 0.2-ish of a second off of, so not much in it, but still pretty good. Beats out the V12 Gremlin, the Civic RS, the Turbo Traveller. Yeah, a solid time from a solid car. Again, sort of, when it comes to its handling capabilities and its speed, it is somewhere in between the Mustang and the Datsun. Perhaps it's a little bit quicker in a straight line than both of those. And yeah, I like it. I don't know really if there's much more to say about it. I usually end up liking the cars that are sort of towards this end of the spectrum on the speed charts, because they aren't quite quick enough to be a massive nuisance to drive through the course, but they're, you know, they've still got a fair bit of power behind them. And, yeah, a pretty good car overall. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Silly Car Showdown. I do hope you've enjoyed. As always, if you'd like to request cars for the show, you can do so down below in the comment section or on my Discord. The request chat is open all the time. Join in the link below. If you're watching this on HD Central, there'll be a link to my channel below. If you enjoy subpar content, you may want to pop over and say hello. Other than that, that is all for today. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.